Hold on. Okay, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us again here on a Thursday morning. It's a gorgeous day down in Hermanus. Hope it's not too cold where you are, particularly for those people up in the Highveld. But I would like to introduce Katherine James-Kleynhans, Kate, as we refer to her. And just to give her a bit of background before she starts on her presentation, Kate was awarded a BA Honours in Archaeology from the University of the Witwatersrand, and she then worked as a geotechnical technician for Saltus Geotechnical for close to 10 years, where she managed data logging and capture in a geotechnical situation, traveling through a lot of Africa to log core and support the geologists. In 2010, she started at Museum Africa as the curator of the Geology Museum, and has remained in that position where she has created and maintained the digital database from the collection's existing hard copy data, as well as the creation of educational and public programs. She also runs the Museums Association Committee and assists in maintaining a positive public image for this wonderful museum and great piece of geological heritage that she's going to talk about. She is a quilter, gamer, and mother, who also helps manage a VoIP, V-O-I-P, voice over IP system server, and moderates a Twitch channel in her spare time. Thanks, Kate. We really appreciate you making the time to do this, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. Yeah, nobody calls me Katherine ever. All right, thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to start my presentation now. Presumably you can see the hellscape in front of you. It's really, really not that bad, I promise. So we'll just move on from there. The hellscape actually started as a joke by my dad. He saw what's hiding in the storeroom and went, oh no, it sounds like something from a horror movie. So that's why it was included. All right, so Geology Museum, housed in Museum Africa. It's I'm going to present the history and heritage of this museum. Geology, however, has to be introduced as heritage. Geology is cultural heritage. We assign the meaning to the rocks and minerals. If we don't assign that meaning, it's just a rock, just a mineral. So what we make of it is important. And we have to remember through all of this that museums and museum collections all started somewhere small, often very, very small. There's a collection picked up by an amateur. I'm sure we all have rock shelves somewhere. And these collections start these big collections. So the importance of the collections isn't always a scientific interest. Quite often it's in the whimsy. It's, oh, that's a nice rock, I'm going to put it in our pocket. So we have to remember that as humans, we have this urge to collect items, especially when it's a tickle our subconscious. So as I go through this history, I have added at the end a selection of photos of rocks, minerals, but some of them are interesting in the science way, but most of them just tickle me. All right, hang on. So we're going to start with the creation of Joburg. There's a lot of contradictory stories about how gold was founded. There are actually three main themes. In 1886, two prospectors discovered gold in Langlaagte. There was gold found at Volgelstraatfontein in 1884, and the Strubens brothers found gold also in 1884 in Wilgesbracht. What we do know for definite that a village was proclaimed in 1886 and a gold rush started. And 10 years later, by 1896, there were 100,000 people living in the area, which is a large amount of people for the time. We know that the area was what we now know as Ferreirasdorp, and this became a hub for this mining town. The first town was mostly tents, but soon there were tin houses. So there's a couple of photographs. I've used the word early quite often. The reason why is because some of these photographs don't have distinct dates. So these are two photos of early Johannesburg around Ferreirasdorp. The first one is around 1886, probably pushing to 1890. It's a tented camp. You can see it's a collection. You can see here, it's just a collection of tents. There's the odd tin house. And this picture at the bottom is slightly later, probably about 10 years later. You can see the houses are more house-like. They're not as tenty. This is a photograph also of early Johannesburg housing. This is Wilgesbracht. You can see classic tent, absolute classic tent. Most of those tents look like that. You can see how the people were living. This is an early mine improvement. Again, I'm using the word early here. This was probably around 1880, maybe 1889. And what they've done is they've created a bucket mine. So it looks like a well. It's not. These guys here actually, these are diggings from inside the well. These guys would have climbed in the bucket, gone down the well, dug, and come up. So it's an early, very early, deep level mine. This is a photograph of slightly later. This is what the corrugated iron housing would have looked like. See, it's got a stoop. It's quite a nice house. It's got a nice fireplace going. It's got a little yard. So this would have been a more comfortable living situation. Then this is another early photograph of a mining company. This is the Mayer & Carlton Mining Company offices. You can see by now the walls are probably wattle and daub. And there's the deep level mine, the shaft there. But again, this was probably at most 1900. Now we move on to the deep level mining. This one is slightly earlier than this one. You can tell by the sepia. And this one would have been an incline shaft. You can see the shaft going in, and this one here is a deep level shaft. You can actually see there's an incline as well. What's very interesting is this is you can see how these miners didn't just come themselves, they brought their families, and there are a couple of ladies standing here. There's one there and there's one there, dressed in their corsets and their crinoline and their bustles. I can imagine it was an incredibly uncomfortable fashion to have working on a mine, especially if you look at the rough ground here. But they did it and they seemed quite happy to do so. This is one of the first stamp mills from the Rand. This stamp mill, you can actually see the original stamp mill. It was refurbished and placed in the Kloofendal Nature Reserve. So you can go and visit this one. There was another one in central Johannesburg, but that one it's a little bit more dangerous to visit. This stamp mill this battery was imported and arrived in the area in around 1885. The entire stamp mill would have had to be transported via ship and then with Oxwagon. I can imagine it was quite an effort to do. And you can see just how happy and proud these guys look. And they all look a little unkept, but they're very happy to be in this photograph, and they're very happy to be working on the stamp mill. So it's a very classic photograph. Right, so now that we've got a standing and understanding of what early Johannesburg was like, and why early Johannesburg was here, we move into Newtown in the market. Now, Newtown is a rather interesting area. So we've got here a map showing the very, very first suburbs of Johannesburg, the plan. And this map was done in 1896. And you can see the original Johannesburg in this triangle here. In fact, Diagonal Street runs along in this triangle. So you can see that the original there's Diagonal Street, I do apologize. You can see the original sort of layout of how everything would have been. You can see the railway line running through. And this slide just points out where the current Museum Africa in Newtown is. This area here was called the Cooley location in Brickfields. And Brickfields was originally a clay area, and a lot of the bricks used in Fordsburg and early Johannesburg were actually made here. So that area there is where we're talking about. On the 3rd of April in 1904, the Johannesburg Fire Brigade was ordered by the Johannesburg Municipality, Johannesburg City Council, which was now British because this was after Johannesburg was taken over by the Brits, to burn the Cooley location in Brickfields to the ground. And the reason behind this was apparently that the area was harboring plague. At the time, there was a plague in Durban, and there was another outbreak in Cape Town. So the fire brigade was ordered to do it. The people were moved, and a lot of them were moved to places like Soweto, now Soweto and Meadowlands, but they just burnt it. They didn't even bother to flatten it. They just burnt the whole area. There's another picture of the burning. You can see a boy looking slightly distressed looking on. The area was one of the first truly multicultural areas in Johannesburg. And it was the area where Gandhi stayed when he visited South Africa. The area had multiple fantastic places. That there was a hospital, there was churches, there was a temple, there was a mosque, there was a synagogue. There were a large number of hostels and bars. And when I say hostels, I don't mean hostels like modern day hostels. What I mean is houses of ill repute. The area was considered a slum by the British. In fact, they would have recognized it as a slum-like area, similar to the ones in London. So them burning it to the ground was a fairly logical thing for them to do. But at the same time, it was incredibly destructive. Instead of having the slum here, what they wanted to do was to build this fantastic building. And in 1913, the city of Johannesburg opened the fresh food market. This new fresh food market was originally constructed in Scotland, and the entire structure was shipped across to South Africa on a boat and then brought up the same way with an ox wagon. The construction was completed in 1913, and you can see how it's a beautiful structure. You can see how it would have looked originally. This is the entranceway to the structure. This facade was quite fantastic. You can see the date there. It was completed 11th of September 1913. And this is the facade today as well. The only difference is they've now built the Mary Fitzgerald Square, and there's a plinth that runs across this section here where these stairs are, these gentlemen are sitting. But originally, it was quite a nice facade. This is a painting of the interior of the building. So the building was large and airy, and it was meant to house the market. You can see this painting looking down towards what is now these large windows are the entranceway to the market theatre. And if you do go to the market theatre, you can see these entrance windows. The market theatre and Museum Africa share the space, with Museum Africa taking up most of it. This market was much larger and much better equipped to handle the market needs of Johannesburg. It had an area behind it called the potato sheds for storing dry goods. It also had an area for housing cattle and sheep and a butcher's yard. These are just a couple of sketches showing what the interior of the market would look like. These sketches were done in 1974, but they are a good indication of just what the market would look like. You can see the internal balconies here. Another set of sketches just showing the interior. But the building is actually incredibly fascinating. Like I said, it was constructed originally in Scotland, and the entire building was made to handle what they would have considered earthquakes and we would have considered earth tremors. So that the building is based on these pillars here, and has these fantastic metal struts going up. They're actually painted pink in the building as it is, and I've inserted this photograph of one of these structures. And these structures hold the entire structure up. And all of the metal part, like I said, was shipped from Scotland, fabricated there. And these bolts are huge. They're roughly the size of a dinner plate. And you can just see how absolutely amazing it is. Right, this is another internal photograph of the market. You can see the balcony that would have run the length of the market. You can see the kind of produce. It's the same sort of produce that we have today. I love this guy's moustache. This is looking down the length of the building again, the windows in the end of the market theatre, and you can see the internal balconies and the clocks and the hustle and bustle of the market scene. This is a photograph showing the rear of the market, those little crenulations we saw in the earlier stage looking at the facade. And these are what were called the potato sheds, and they would store all the dry goods here. And the wagons are just the goods trucks moving in and out, trying to get everything in and out to everyone in Joburg. This is a slightly more updated version with some rather fancy looking trucks. These potato sheds are now part of the Newtown Mall. In fact, in 1974, Johannesburg decided that the fresh foods market was too small, and they moved it to the current one in City Deep. And the market, the old market now, was then saved as a museum. And these are just few current photographs of the new market, and you can see they're very similar in a way to the old ones. Nothing's really changed, just sort of the location, the food's the same, the trucks are the same, the hustle and bustle is really exactly the same. So the Newtown market was then changed into the market theatre and the Africana Museum in progress, and the market gardens, the railways, potato sheds, and the butchers are now actually the Newtown Mall. And you can visit those potato sheds. They've kept the basic structure. Right, so now we move on to the next important person. This is a set of photographs of David Draper. David Draper was born in Cape Town in January in 1849. He was a self-taught geologist. He learned the hard way working in Kimberley and then moved up to the Transvaal. In 1867, he volunteered as an Orange Free State burger in the pursuit of war. He then also realized that South Africa needed its own geological society because of the great interest in the minerals and mining geology in the country. At a meeting in February 1895, he was part of the group that led to the founding of the Geological Society of South Africa. The Geological Society of South Africa and the Chamber of Mines then amalgamated their collections and created a museum of sorts in 1890, which was the beginning of the Geology Museum. David Draper was also the curator of this museum, the librarian, and honorary secretary for the Chamber of Mines in 1897, when he was commenting in their minutes that they had added 1,000 items to their collection. These photographs show just his general face, and this one here at the bottom shows the Anton van Bo bronze that still stands in the museum. The other part of the claim to fame he has, besides being one of the few people who got managed to be kicked out of both South Africa and Britain during the Boer Wars, mostly because he kept siding with the wrong people. So while he was in Johannesburg under the British, he was siding with the wrong side and got kicked out. And then he went back to London and sided with the wrong side and got kicked out again. So he ended up in Argentina. But besides that, he was the man who discovered the original Zeerbecom water source for Johannesburg. Before the discovery of Zeerbecom in around 1898, Johannesburg was reliant on rainwater and rainwater collecting for all their water. So if anyone has seen Johannesburg in the rain, you only get the rain in summer, so the water goes foul. Typhoid was absolutely rife, and there were huge droughts. So the Johannesburg City Council asked him if he could please have a look and see if he could find some water. The anecdote goes that at the time he was actually being kicked out. He was being exiled. So he supposedly sent a telegraph from Durban when he was boarding the ship that read, "Visit Zeerbecom, find red handkerchief. Water there, return handkerchief." And when they went to Zeerbecom, they did. They found the Zeerbecom aquifer, and they awarded him this illuminated scroll and a certificate. The Zeerbecom water supply supplied water to Johannesburg, and up until the building and start work at the Vaal Dam. So it was a huge accomplishment. His collections were later added to what would become the Geology Museum, and part of those collections is still in the museum. One of those parts is this rather fancy specimen box. He was incredibly accomplished. He was the first South African to be elected to the London Geological Society. He was a life fellow of the GSSA, and he was awarded an honorary doctorate by Wits in 1927. The Geological Society's most prestigious medal, its highest honor, is this one over here. This is the Dr. Draper Memorial Award. It's bestowed on members who have contributed outstanding contributions to South African geology. Right, so basis, quick recap, started 1890, joint management by the GSSA and the Chamber of Mines, founded by Dr. Draper. In 1927, the management and maintenance of the museum was transferred to the city of Johannesburg, and the museum was relocated to the top floor of the Johannesburg Public Library. In fact, quite a few people might remember that library. I do. These pictures just show a couple of just black and white stills of what the original layout for the Johannesburg Library would look like. You can actually see that bust that I showed earlier over there. In 1935, after this move, the City Council created a volunteer committee made up of practicing geologists to advise the curator at the time. This committee is still going today. It's called the Geology Museum Association, and they're a huge help in managing not only the everyday, but also advising in what samples we need to collect and what sort of publicity and displays we need to do. This is just an overhead view of what the library collection would have looked like, showing the balconies and some of the more. And I don't want to say advanced, but the glass display cases. There's another set of pictures of the display cases. Sorry, the display cases were ordered from the controller of stores for £1,476 in 1934. They were ordered without consulting the curator, and the minutes at the time show that the curator was quite distressed because he considered the display cases incredibly ugly and didn't think they could be used properly for display and would be better used as storage. So a compromise was come to, and each display case, these big display cases here, had a little ball at the bottom. All the little ball feet were removed so it would lower them down and make them more friendly for display. These display cases are fantastic. So they were used mostly for storage, not totally for display. So now we move to the actual Geology Museum in Museum Africa. In 1995, the museum was moved from the library to Museum Africa as the Africana Museum in progress. The current Geology Museum was opened in 2010. This is a collage showing the current museum. Museum Africa was envisioned as a cultural hub, centralized hub for all the museums scattered around Johannesburg. The current museum, like I said, was opened in 2010, 12 years after the move. This slide just shows the collage of what the interior of the museum is supposed to look like, also showing the interior of the refurbished market. Once again, unfortunately, the museum does need updating, but with our current ecological and economic and climate, it just doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So what's in the store? The museum storeroom cases should look slightly familiar because we're still using those beautiful display cases that were bought in the 1930s. The storeroom is roughly 200 meters square, and you can see the display cases here. The original cases are fantastic for storing because they are so big, and they do lend a very old-fashioned, old-world charm to the storeroom. The collection houses over 21,000 specimens. Sometimes you find a grouping like this one. This is a geological rose garden. Unfortunately, due to the funding for the collection, there's no funding at all for collecting new items, and there's no policy for exchanging duplicate items. But this has been the case since the early 90s, so it's not something that's new. Unfortunately, budget cuts within the city council have led to some nasty side effects. We had a flood in the end of October last year, and these are just some of the effects of the flood. You can see the flood damage on the floors here, and you can see some of the damage to those fantastic display cases. This is another set just showing, once again, the flood damage. It's now been 7 months since the flood, and the city council has now started to address the problem. Unfortunately, due to policies and procedures, it does take time. The display cases have, however, been damaged over time with mold, and some of the specimens are beginning to disintegrate. So, moving on to the pretty part of the selection, into the museums and rocks. This is Princess Alice, the Countess of Athlone. She donated a great many items to the museum over her time as the wife of the Governor General to South Africa. The suburb of Athlone in Cape Town was named after her husband. She was the longest living princess of royal blood and the longest surviving child of Queen Victoria. She also had a great love for Great Danes. She donated some of the more amusing pieces to the museum. This is a piece of this one I've been practicing saying, an Arseno-subimite pseudonorth after mamatite. This piece is always referred to as the broccoli, and the kids love it. They see it immediately and comment on it. In fact, when I asked Bruce Kencross if I could use some of his photographs, I specifically asked him if I could use the broccoli pick, and he knew exactly which photograph I meant. There's another piece donated by the Countess. This is an azurite crystal. This photograph was taken by our Museum Africa in-house photographer. Again, from the beginning, I mentioned collections and people picking up pieces of rock that interested them. This is a piece of Cornish dressed granite from just outside Truro Cathedral in Cornwall. The cathedral itself was designed and consecrated around 1880 and 1887 and completed in 1910. This piece always reminds me of every time I go anywhere. I'll find a piece of rock that I rather fancy, pick it up and put it in my pocket. And this is a similar idea. Somebody obviously thought this piece of rock was important, picked it up and brought it all the way back to South Africa, and it ended up in our museum. It's a fairly long way for a piece of dressed stone to travel, but it is fascinating. This is one of these slides that show an important event, and important events become sort of a standpoint in the museum. They give some of our items extreme meaning. This is the moment where Ernest Oppenheimer, this rather distinguished gentleman over here, pushed the button to start the first mechanical diamond drill on the random. When I say mechanical diamond drill, I mean the big truck-like electric ones. And here's a photograph of him unveiling the commemoration stone to celebrate the event. And of course, what he was doing is he was starting the drill to drill this little piece here, this is the drill hole in this piece of South Reef. And it's a fairly unassuming rock. It's not particularly fascinating or interesting by itself. It's got a nice bluish sheen to it where it's been polished. But if you didn't have the photo and the story, it would be a lot less interesting and a lot less important. These are just two samples of dioptase from the collection. The collection has one of the larger collections of summate minerals, mostly because in the early days of the museum, and when I say early days, I'm talking sort of 1900 to possibly 1940, we had a lot of people donating items, especially from the summate mines. This is a cerussite 6-link twinned with wolframite and a twin cerussite 6-link star, also from summate. These two are some of my favorites. This is a piece of iron stained calcite rose. If you take a photograph of this piece of mineral with a cell phone camera, it actually glows bright red. It's very interesting. This is one of my favorite pieces in the museum. It's ammonite that's been replaced by pyrite, and the ammonite is actually a very, very nice golden color. Again, these are two just to remind us that what's important might not always be the same for everybody. This is a clay nodule that was found while digging a fence post. And this piece here was a water-worn pebble found while plying land near Costa Station. These again just remind us that somebody, a farmer, found these, thought they were incredibly interesting, and took a huge amount of effort to come into the city and donate these pieces to a museum. And while they're not scientifically amazing, they're still important. They might not be diamonds or gold, and we might not find them amazing. But at the time, they were what sparked the interest of those people. Not everything in our collection is large. We have some small items. This is a small collection of cameos and a small collection of amber. I don't have a great deal of information about these items because in the move from the library building into Museum Africa, a lot of our archives were lost, and in the digitizing, some of the information, the metadata, has been lost. The amber does have inclusions. A lot of it's just dirt, although this one here is a little bug. And these are quite small pieces and quite fun to look at. These are just another two pieces that I find fascinating, mostly because of their bright colors. This is chalcopyrite from Borkslake, and you can actually see the blue streaking in it. And this is a piece of stitch type replacing chrysotile, and the contrast in color here, that's bright purple against the green, makes it a very striking piece. These are two pieces of Ventersdorp Contact Reef and North Reef. These pieces represent a large section of our collection. Our collection was originally meant as a reference library. David Draper intended it to be used so that people coming up from Kimberley and from Cape Town would be able to come into the museum, go, I need to go know what gold looks like, and come and get one of these pieces of rock and go, okay, I know what this looks like now, this is what I'm looking for. So we have an incredibly large collection of especially Johannesburg reef. And these are two very sort of normal pieces of rock. They're not normal for the collection. A lot of our photographs are taken by the very talented Bruce Cairncross. You can tell that the photographs are taken by him because the quality is amazing. This is a piece of ladlokite from Matrix with rhombohedral olive green siderite from Sumeb. The piece is 8.2 centimeters and was bought in 1968 for the collection. This is a green smithsonite. You can see the columns are hollow with native copper and calcite, 9 centimeters, again from Sumeb. This is calcite enclosing cuprite and limonite matrix. This is from a younger mine in Namibia. It's 4.5 centimeters. A lot of our collection comes from Africa and Southern Africa, but we do have international pieces. This is a piece of toroidal hemimorphite. It's 15 centimeters large and comes from Durango in Mexico. I did mention David Draper's collection. The next 8 slides are all from David Draper's collection. This is the zeolite crystals, some altered to malachite with quartz and calcite, also from Sumeb. This is malachite after zeolite pseudomorph from Sumeb, another X-Draper piece. This is sericite cuprite X-Draper piece. This is the desclosite after vanadite. Some of these pieces, and you can see this here, are quite delicate. The columns in here are quite, you've got to be careful holding them. They're very delicate to do. I like this piece. I like its composition. This is copper and smithsonite. You can see the copper coming up here. This is desclosite X-Draper piece. Again, you can see those columns. This is a piece of germanite ore. Draper had this habit of shaping his specimens. So any specimen that wasn't aesthetically pleasing, he would shape into this cushion shape. So we have huge amounts of items in the lower drawers in one of the display cases that are all this very interesting shape, and they all have these lovely handwritten notes added to them. And they're all part that was donated from Draper's collection after his passing. Not all of our pieces are small. This is quite a big piece. This is a piece of aragonite and granular vanadite. It is 24 centimeters large, and you can't really get a sense of scale in this photograph. So Bruce took a photograph of me holding it. So those are my hands holding it. Some of our pieces are incredibly small as well. We have a collection called the Murchison collection. It's a collection of over 1,500 pieces, where none of the pieces are larger than 5 centimeters. This collection, this photograph shows 2 crosses. This cross is interesting because those red stones are actually rubies. This bottom one is also, I find it incredibly fascinating. It's a memento mori with a signet stamp. This little piece of amber here isn't actually amber, it's actually bakelite. The entire piece is made of plastic, I suppose. But this little carving here and the little giraffe are both stamps meant to remind you. And the stamp at the bottom here has a little chalice with 2, I'm guessing they're sparrows, and there's a saying here in Matthew. This is another one of our large pieces, and this piece is quite important, and I hope I'm going to pronounce this right. This is an Eötvös torsion balance. This is actually one of the balances that were used to discover gold in the St. Helena farm in the Free State. In 1938, the payable Free State reefs were discovered, and they discovered using the information gained from these torsion balances. The black marks on the wall behind the torsion balance over here are unfortunately a side effect of our recent flood. So what's next for the museum? Well, in May, we opened a display called Geology Through a Lens. These are a couple of photographs of the opening. Geology Through a Lens is a photographic display talking about the contribution of photography to geology as a science, and it also looks at areas of fantastic geological beauty around Africa. It has been opened at the Wits Origin Center, and the display will go on until September. We are hoping that we can move the display down to the Cape once its tenure is over. The openings were fantastic. You can see from the photographs. And this is a picture of the Chang child that was at the opening so that everyone could have a look at it. So that's all I really have at the moment. Thank you very much, especially to the Geology Museum Association and the Overberg Group. This picture just shows a modern photograph of that same facade we saw earlier with its new brightly colored steps. And this is a photograph of the interior of the Geology Museum, showing a bronze of Robert Broom. Its twin stands at the entrance of Sturfentine Caves, and like the one at Sturfentine Caves, his nose has been rubbed shiny by all the people passing by. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kate. That was wonderful, and I'm sure it's going to raise some questions. I've certainly got a bunch of them. And thanks, Bruce. I see you're on the call too. So given that you sort of front and center here as well with Katherine, you better turn on your video so we can see you and identify the person that's written these wonderful books and taken all the pictures. Thanks. Morning. I see your hairstyle is also quite good.
Okay, my video has decided to go crazy again. I'm going to have to shut text support. Give me half a second.
Maybe I can just kick off, and I'm sure there'll be other questions. You had a fascinating diamond collection, Wits diamonds, in the museum as well. I presume that still exists, and who's sort of studying it at the moment? Bruce, do you want to kick off while Kate reconnects?
Sure, no. Yeah, look, you're quite right. The alluvial diamonds, they're quite famous green diamonds from the Wits, are still in the museum under lock and key, as Kate will confirm.
Yes.
And there has already been a paper published by Katie Smart and authors from Wits.
Yeah.
They accessed them a couple of years ago, and they published a paper. I think it was in Nature, if I recall. And,
yes, it was.
And recently, no publications yet, but Sebastian Tappe in our department at UJ is busy with some research on those diamonds as well. You're right.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, I didn't include any photographs of the diamonds, mostly because they're still being researched.
Okay. Well, the next one we would expect to have pictures of diamonds, given all the diamond expertise down here in the Overberg.
I will endeavor to do so.
Okay. All right. Right. Questions, guys, ladies? Right. I've got a few more.
Go for it.
Okay. Does anyone want to go ahead?
Can I ask something, please?
Sure. Morning, yourself.
I have a friend whose father was the general manager of Eastern Transvaal Consolidated Mines in Barberton area. Long dead, of course, and his son actually has a table that was given to his father on his retirement. The table itself has, I'd say, about 20, maybe 30 specimens of rock that shows clean gold. In other words, gold that you can actually visually see in the polished pieces. It is a table that is legally in his hands, because it was at the time given to his father. And I know that the mines went to considerable effort to declare the table itself. Now, Theo is now also about 70, 75 years of age. Clearly, it's a thing that is very dear to them. But as things go and the years go by, of course, it'll lose value. And I was hoping, and I heard Kate say that the museum doesn't purchase any items like that. But if it is lost for the future, it'll be a shame. And
Absolutely.
That's all I want to say. Yeah.
It would be a shame to lose an item like that. Just hopefully the family will keep it.
I mean, would the family be interested in perhaps donating it to the museum? Does that work or allow it, Kathy and Bruce?
It would be allowed. We'd love to have an item like that. At the moment, I'd hesitate to take something, though, basically due to the state of the museum. But if
Yeah.
the museum does get better, I would be very happy to take any donation.
Well, I can only speak to them and hear what they have to say, but I know that they have just recently moved down to the Cape, so the item will be down in the Cape at this point in time.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, I mean, it's something we can follow up, but just, given your point that you've just made about the state of the museum, I mean, here's this amazing geoheritage, which goes right back to the start of mining and the development of Joburg and the country, basically, along with diamonds. Some ideas, Bruce, and I did speak to you about it, but Bruce and Kate on, the future of this museum and this amazing heritage collection. Sort of.
I can answer that if you like, because I know that Kate is sometimes her hands are tied by the management at the museum as to publicly saying, certain things. But as a member of the GMA, and Jill Drennan is the chairperson at the moment, and also Richard and Morris Fulyoun are on the committee, the four of us, we are concerned about the collection and have been that way for many years now. Again, Kate didn't advertise it, it's a negative thing, but there have been thefts from the collection over the years, and with not often, but with no prosecutions, for example. So there are security issues. And also, as you heard, there was this flood late last year that really, in our opinion of the GMA, the management have really dragged their heels. I mean, you see the condition of those old display cases. They are deteriorating. And so we are worried about the collection there. It's the largest, I think, or one of the largest in South Africa in an institution like that. And certainly some of the components, especially the Sumeb part of it, are, I also believe, maybe
priceless.
Priceless, and also I think the largest, in fact, even more so than the Ditsong Museum in Pretoria, the Council for Geoscience collection. So there's great value there. It's an asset that's under threat, and the GMA, in consultation with the GSSA, for example, and actually with other people like, for example, Flo Bird from the Heritage Association here in Parktown, we are brainstorming as to what to do about it, because we are concerned.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. I mean, what I find a bit disappointing, we have 150 years of mining in this country. We created some of the world's largest, mining companies. What support do you get, or would you get from some of the mining companies to, come up with an endowment or a trust or something to, whether it gets, whatever you're going to do, it's going to cost money. And even just cleaning up and doing the repairs. I mean, where is our industry in this?
We do get some support from some mining companies. The Geology Through a Lens display was funded almost entirely by African and Bushveld Minerals. Unfortunately, the larger mining companies, even though they've said they're willing to lend support, it always ends up being there's an and a but and an extra from them. Although they are around, a lot of the time they're not lending support to museums and cultural heritage, and it's mostly because of the same problem that the municipalities have, is there are larger issues that need to be addressed first. So the millions they could be giving to us are instead being given to housing and to other social projects.
Yeah, and I guess there's also the ownership issue. I must say I was encouraged with your comment about the controller, and unlike sort of modern South African municipalities, he or she did his job. Very different situation to what we see going on today.
The minutes from between about 1927 and about 1940 are very interesting to read, because the controller quite often just goes and gets things and doesn't actually consult with anything. And part of the reason why the GMA was originally created was to stop that happening, because the curator at the time was not a geologist. He was actually a librarian. For the most part, he was a librarian who was tasked to have some geological knowledge. but that didn't mean he knew what he was doing. So quite often you get these strange notes of controller has bought glass displays. Glass displays not acceptable. And that's all it'll say. It won't say anything else about them. So it's changed quite a bit, but I do enjoy those minutes.
Eddie, we need some comment. That torsion bar, what was that for? Was that gravity measurements?
I can answer some of it. I sat and read it up. Quite possibly my dad or somebody has more knowledge, can answer more. The torsion bar was meant to measure, and this is very much a lies to children answer because I don't know the full answer. But it was meant to measure comparative
density,
magnetic density, but also curvature. So the quartz of the gold reefs is less magnetic than some of the other rocks. So that's how they picked them up, the comparative magnetism. But like I said, it's very much a lies to children answer. I sat and researched it and I still don't understand it fully. So somebody who knows more about would probably have a much, much better answer for you.
Yeah, well, our geophysicist is sleeping. Where are you, Eddie? Bruce, have you got a comment, Bruce?
No, I don't. I just want to remind you that I'm a classic sedimentologist.
The person who should be talking is my dad, and he's being very, very quiet.
Yeah, well, these old timers should know all these things, and Mr. Costellan is not.
What was the question?
What's that torsion bar? Is that an early gravity meter, or is it something to do with magnetics?
It's a gravity meter.
Yeah. Okay.
And I thought it was used for the Carltonville area, but it was used to measure gravitic anomalies at depth, so they could locate the reefs. Actually, they were really trying to locate the contact between the lavas and the reef originally, as I understand it.
Okay.
And from there they got some idea of where to put in diamond drilling, and the rest is history, I guess.
That particular one was actually used in 1938 to find the Orange Free State gold reefs, and it's one of the set that they used. I think they had about 6 of them, and that was one of the original ones that they used. And it's actually a double balance. It's got 2 torsion balances on it, so that you can do 2 sets of comparison at the same time.
A torsion balance basically measures the variations in gravity.
Yeah.
So, and by doing that, you obviously, and calibrating it, it's quite a process.
Yeah, for sure.
I spent about 8 weeks one Christmas when I was a student, sitting on top of copies doing barometric readings while we were doing gravimetrics, and it's very, very painstaking.
And every time you walked around it, everything changed.
Yep.
Yeah. And Sebastian, I see you on the talk. Do you want to comment about some of the diamond work? Sebastian? Is he there?
He's muted. You're muted.
Yeah. Sebastian? Yeah.
Kate, if somebody brings an interesting item to the museum, how is it evaluated and by whom?
Okay, if you bring me an interesting item, I will have a look at it and see if we actually have another item that's similar. If we do, I will then photograph your item and send those photographs to the GMA, asking them if we do need another item like this. If we don't have that item, I will provisionally accept the item and then once again take down as much information as I can find. I'll sit and interview you about the item for probably half an hour, 45 minutes, and then I'll send that information and the photographs to the GMA. And once I've got that information and the GMA has approved it, I will send the information to the city council and I will section the item. If we don't want the item, I'll take photographs and ask anyway, because the more you know.
But you're the first filter.
Yeah.
So if I send a donut along with it, then you.
Oh no, then I'll just eat it. I love donuts.
Thank you.
But I think the problem
You
is,
still want me to comment?
Yeah.
sorry, if I can just comment on that question. The problem is the museum has no budget to buy any specimens. So if one is wanting to sell something, as has happened in the past, where things have been purchased, the museum can't buy them. But the GMA, the Museum Association, which is an independent committee, we do have a bank account, and we are able to use that money if necessary to assist in purchases, and also not just in purchases of the specimens, but also, as we've done in the past, we've paid for some of the upkeep and the maintenance in the museum to get things like light bulbs, etc. So the GMA tries to assist in those type of situations. I just wanted to say that.
Oh, great, thanks.
Is there some insurance in place?
I'm not going to answer that question. Sorry, I would like to, but I'm not going to.
Well, I can answer that based on experience. I don't know. I have no insight into the nuts and bolts of the management. But considering the specimens that have been stolen and not ever retrieved, Kate, you can correct me if I'm wrong. There's been no insurance claim to get the monetary value of the stolen specimens, to my knowledge.
Insurance claims were made, but they were never
Upheld.
appeared.
Amazing. Okay, Sebastian, hi. Thanks for coming on. Do you want to comment on the diamond work? Morning.
Yeah, sorry, I had a technical problem. Yeah, so as Bruce mentioned, in 2016, one paper got published in Nature Geoscience on the Witz diamonds on 3 stones from the museum. That was led by Katie Smart. Yeah. And I was the co-author, and then a couple of other people. And the main story from these diamonds was actually that they're clearly mantle derived, because there had always been sort of the suspicion that they're maybe not even from the mantle. So they clearly from the mantle, not too different from kimberlitic diamonds. And what we found, what then sort of, I guess, entitled it to be into a Nature Group journal, was that we found that the nitrogen was actually crustal. So the nitrogen isotopes that we measured, they all had crustal signatures. So we could show that there was actually some form of recycling of crustal material going back into the mantle and then coming back. But we were not able to answer what the actual carrier was to these diamonds. And that's where we had now follow up in the same sort of group of investigators to try to measure the trace elements in these diamonds, which is very difficult because there is not much trace elements in a diamond. And we try to look at sort of metal isotopes and metal trace element signatures to get a better feeling where they actually came from in the mantle and what brought them up. So that's what we're currently busy with.
Great. So I mean, that was crustal or what's it? Plate tectonics and in motion pre 2.9 billion, more or less. What's the age of the Witz? 2.9. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the explorers haven't yet found the kimberlites back then that brought them to the surface. Presumably they're highly or eroded and gone.
So our idea was that by that time it didn't probably need a kimberlite. It could have been any form of arc magmatism, sort of during craton amalgamation. Anything that's sort of near a subduction zone and taps into a mantle wedge could technically bring up diamonds of that kind. So it's known from the superior craton, from there are some lamprophires, arc-related lamprophires in the Archean that actually also diamondiferous. So it's not totally crazy, the idea. But we were saying it doesn't really need kimberlites to bring this up. So
okay, fascinating. So they are being looked after and some interesting work being done.
Yeah, and unfortunately also with delay because of the pandemic, obviously.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting about those diamonds is that there is that small collection in the Joburg Museum. There was also a collection, in fact, a petri dish of them in the Brelach Museum at Witz. That I think it was the early 1970s, there was a theft, and they were stolen. But so the 2 museums actually had these. Well, the one still has them, but they appear to be not that uncommon. If you look at the early publications, there's the book by Denny on the Klerksdorp goldfields, where he actually records these, and depending on the process of the mining and the crushing of the ore, they were fairly common there. And I remember, I think it's in the IGC publication, the 2016 in episodes, the article that is done on the Wits by the Viljoens and Rod Tucker. He also refers to these, and quite a few of the mines on the East Rand apparently also had these diamonds. So not many are preserved by the sounds of it, but they appear to be not, look, obviously they're rare, but they were around on quite a few of the mining operations. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, I think they were more common than we actually realized, Bruce, as you say. Quite a lot of people, you know, when speaking to old timers and Anglo and De Beers and that too, they were all, you know, aware of odd diamonds coming out the Wits somewhere along the way. Obviously, there was always, you know, a bit of concern that you have kimberlites with diamonds cutting the Wits. So, you know, were you looking at those? But as you know better than most, I mean, those diamonds are very distinctive, sort of green and brown spotted.
John, if I may, can I just share my screen quickly?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's just some photographs. I don't know if you can see that. These are.
Wow. Okay, fantastic.
These are very old photographs of those diamonds. I'm just going to flip through them. You can actually see the green staining.
Yeah, and the spots.
Yeah, Sebastian can correct me, but the green staining is actually just on the outside. It's a shell and the staining is from the uranium in the gold reef.
The groundwater.
Yeah. And they're not particularly the most fantastic photos, but they are photographs of those diamonds.
So can I add?
Yeah, go for it.
As Katherine said, the green is usually radiation damage from the uraninite in the conglomerates. So sitting there essentially side by side for a couple of billion years together. And that's essentially causing the damage. And the moment for those 3 stones that we cut in half in 2015, 2016, the green color completely disappears after laser cutting and polishing.
These are photographs of some of those 3 stones.
So the moment a little bit of heat is applied, the crystal essentially anneals itself and gets rid of the radiation damage. So, and that would be impossible in the kimberlite to have that sort of situation. This is really an effect of some highly uranium-rich material sitting next to it for very long.
Yeah, absolutely, Sebastian. I'm sure you've seen Marangi diamonds too. I mean, they look like sort of black road aggregate, real cruddy stuff. But obviously millions of carats, which again came out of an old Proterozoic, you know, sediment conglomerate. But when you cut those, you know, again, you had a better quality diamond once you'd taken off the surface or cut them in half.
Yeah,
I'm sure you looked at those as well. Anyway, other questions?
Just to come back to the preservation and continuation of the museum, have you guys considered crowdfunding, you know, on other social platforms, coming in, selling off stuff like autographed photographs of Bruce and so on, and making like ownership certificates or donation certificates, getting the crowd out there to bring in the capital?
That would have to be done through the GMA. Bruce, can we turn you into a supermodel?
He's got to get his hair done properly. And we could probably live with you, Kate.
I'm a bit round at the moment.
Look, I mean, that's a great idea. Yeah. I mean, it's a great idea, and Bruce can comment. I guess ultimately it gets back to ownership, because I think, as Bruce told me, you know, the city council have some ownership of this collection. Is that right, Bruce?
Yeah, look, the thing is that the collection used to belong, as you heard from Kate's talk, to the Society and the Chamber of Mines up until the 1950s. But then for various reasons, and they were good at the time, the collection was donated to the city. So Johannesburg City owns that collection. Unlike the one in the Ditsong Museum, the Old Transvaal Museum, is the collection of the Council for Geoscience, which at any time, if the council wanted to, they could withdraw back to Silverton if they wanted to. So there are obviously legal issues at hand. We can't just say we're going to take the collection out and move it to Cape Town, you know, without going to the council. And I think maybe one of the problems that we have encountered with either crowdfunding or trying to get a company to sponsor is this sort of negativity about the collection, about, yeah, there's not much in the way of security, and if we support something, what will happen to it? And there is a bit of a mental block, which is partly correct, actually, because of the situation. So there are some challenges. I mean, if we want to go out to ask for money of anyone, crowdfunding or a company or a private individual, you have to be able to say, look, if you're going to give us this, we can guarantee you this. And I think Kate can correct me, but at the moment, we cannot guarantee the security of the collection or the well-being of it. I mean, based on this last event of the flood, for example. So there are challenges.
I'm just thinking in terms of getting it known, you know, getting the general public more aware of the situation, you know. That is, you know.
Kenny, can I comment here? Because obviously Kate can't really. But
Sorry.
for instance, I've offered personally to make a donation when they had a previous flood. And in fact, we did make donations in kind to pump out that previous flood. But if I offer a donation in financial terms, the whole bureaucracy insists that that donation be made to the Johannesburg City Council, who then will not ring fence that money. And so you can't guarantee, even if you do crowdfunding and you donate it to the museum, whether that money will be used by the museum. It will go into the general fiscus. But if you work through GMA, it would be a different matter.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything further because it's a delicate subject. Sorry about that.
What we have started doing, and it's not just me, it's various other curators and other museums. If you do want to donate something to us, as in we want to donate a display case, donate the actual display case instead of the money, because I can accept a display case, but I can't accept the 50,000 Rand or 25,000 Rand. That would be the cost of the display case, because the chances are I won't get that money because it'll be rescheduled to be used somewhere else.
Mm. Yeah, I'm thinking of rather a first step, the more public awareness, and then you ring fence the money within the GMA and say, look, here's our tool. This is the amount of money that we've gathered to look after it. Now come to the table and we'll talk to you.
Talks like this are very much part of what we want to do as publicity, and doing this talks like this in tours it's an important part of what I'm supposed to do. And I didn't say it in my talk, I actually took it out, but the more people that come into the museum and go, we want to see geology, and the more people that come and talk to me and go, we want to help, we want to do this, the better. At the moment, because of the city policies surrounding volunteers and offers, even taking in volunteers to help with things becomes a little bit difficult, because you have to be vetted by the city council, and that vetting process is annoying. But
point taken.
Publicity like this is fantastic, and the more people that know we're there, the more people can speak up, and the more people can go, why hasn't this been done, or why has this been done? And that's fantastic. And I'd love to have a huge group of people turn up and go, what's going on? Why is this happening? It's just, I don't know that many people.
Well, I think, Henny, you're absolutely right. And with your first point, I mean, this is a national treasure. We've got to really, all get on the soapbox and start marketing it a whole lot better. And obviously, present company excluded, Bruce and others are doing a great job. But just as a profession, again, and and it goes back to my point about the companies, where I can understand their reticence. But we really need to raise the profile. And of course, and I think, again, you have programs, we need to get kids and youngsters and the historically disadvantaged, picking up rocks and getting to see some of these amazing specimens in a museum like that. And you obviously have a very good, like the program you showed us at the end, and the one you want to bring to Cape Town. And I'm sure it's happening, but again, we need all the museums to work together and get people like Wendy Taylor here in Cape Town, involved. She's amazing with her school programs and pop-up puppet shows. So, you know, there might be some ideas for you to share with her as well, Kate. She's a great resource.
Okay, I would like that.
Yeah.
We rather interestingly, we do have the Johannesburg Heritage Society quite often brings through groups of kids, and fairly often with those groups of kids, I get one child will come up to me. I picked up this pretty rock, and they'll describe it to me. So the kids are already picking up the rocks. We just don't have the feet on the ground to help them foster that interest. And part of that issue is I'm the only person working in the Geology Museum officially. And the GMA, everyone in the GMA does a huge amount of work, and they're incredibly supportive. And Bruce, you could back me up on this. They're all professionals. They all have jobs of their own. Yeah. And Jill, our chairman, she's at WITS, and she does a huge amount of work towards doing exactly that, is getting that interest, keeping that interest. And that's the hardest part, is not getting the interest, it's keeping it. It's very easy to get a kid to be interested in a shiny rock and put it in their pocket. The difficult part is getting that kid to be interested in that same shiny rock 10 years later.
Well, it strikes me as you need, sorry, Bruce, you need some interns there that you can also be training to do your job one day, and have some more, you know, resources to take kids and groups around the museum. Sorry, Bruce.
No, I'm going to say, look, it's not all doom and gloom. And in fact, what you've just said is quite important. I remember a long time ago, I've been on the GMA for, I think, over 25 years. But I remember I actually volunteered to help out on a Saturday when there was no curator. Because before we appointed, before the city council appointed Kate, there was no curator for 10 years. And I volunteered to help on weekends, and they just said, no, you can't. So my way around that was I joined the GMA. and in fact, we would welcome ad hoc, you know, to get people onto our committee, because at the moment it's the core of the four of us and Kate. And it is publicized as far as we can. You know, we've given talks at the IGC Congress, at the last Geo Congress, at IMA, I gave a talk. We both UJ geology students and Wits School of Geoscience, I know when we could, before COVID, the students used to come down to the museum as one of their practical excursions.
Yeah.
But I think part of the problem is, the challenge, you shouldn't say problems, is that for example, we have these talks now and also at congresses, but in a way we're singing to the choir here. We need to somehow get out to this other much larger audience, because it's kind of ironical, you know, if you look at Johannesburg and gold and the Wits, that the museum, and this is where Richard and Morris actually are really trying to push, to have something linking the Wits gold fields to geotourism here, that when you arrive in Johannesburg as a tourist, when you can in future, the first thing you do, you come to the museum because you want to learn something about why is Johannesburg here. And that's sort of the target audiences we are trying to, you know, to attract. Obviously, it's not that easy now with what's going on with museums being open and closed, but it's not all doom and gloom. I just wanted to say that.
No, we agree with you, Bruce. And I mean, there needs to be a very concerted, and it's starting to happen in places, a very concerted sort of geoheritage drive where, and the critical thing, and you mentioned it, is to, you know, link these processes. So when someone flies into Joburg, you know, where do they walk into a big board that says, you know, the city made on gold? Obviously, there's some legacies, but we can deal with those. You know, and as you say, direct them to the museum. And I mean, think about all the other museums around town, you know, like the, you know, the Apartheid Museum and the others. You know, there's an amazing amount of history and positive and some negative legacy that should be, you know, told to the world and benefit citizens of Johannesburg. Yeah. Anyway, thanks everyone. That's been fantastic. Thanks, Kate. The talk will go into YouTube by sort of early next week, courtesy of Nolene Pauls, who does a great job for us, and we'll send it to you and you can distribute it. We'll also distribute it. And then Isak, maybe could you drop us an email and just see, or a phone number, and we can follow up a little bit on your magic table. It sounds amazing.
And then just John,
we'll do that.
just to add a final little bit, and I should have said it in the talk and I forgot. If you guys go down to your local museum, go and talk to the curator. Quite often we love talking, and we can talk about an endless amount of anything. And if you're nice to us, we'll show you the back of the store. But also, if anyone has any kind of questions or anything they wanted to ask me that I can't answer on here, please feel free to drop me an email or just message me, and I'll do my best. But yeah, please come into our museums. Please come visit us. The more people that come in, the more people that ask us questions, the happier we are, but also the happier the municipalities and the government are with us, which is important.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, we'll do a little write-up in our monthly newsletter, and put you out there on center stage. But we've got to get you to give more talks like this too to other groups.
Happily.
And the youth, our U3A, unfortunately, it's here in the Cape, and us elderly people don't travel that much these days. But you might want to look around your U3A, and we can ask the local group, who the active U3As are in Johannesburg and environs. We're very fortunate down here. There's some amazing sort of community groups, and everyone's extremely active in the community, or cleaning up beaches or chasing after birds and so on. So, there must be other organizations of similar ilk in Gauteng, hopefully. But thanks, Kate, that was lovely. And thanks to everyone else who contributed. Thanks, Bruce. Really appreciate your input. And I'll be getting back to you on the email shortly with your other talks.
Sure, okay, thanks, John.